It is our inaugural television debut of What's the Truth. I'm Zach Martin, along with Yih-Chau Chang. I want to start off the broadcast with my favorite drink. They're not a sponsor of the show, but Dr. Pepper. Let me explain my fascination with Dr. Pepper. Just a great tasting soda. It's got 23 different flavors. It's probably the tastiest of all diet beverages. And right now, although I have 4 or 5 cases I think I got 3 cases for $12. They don't have enough in Texas because of the COVID-19 situation. So being an entrepreneurial business type of guy, if you're watching in Texas and you really want a Dr. Pepper, if you want a whole case, I will sell it to you at an exorbitant rate, just to show you how much of an American I am. The other thought I had was the idea of libertas, the Latin word for free. And in liberal, you would think that that meant freedom, but I would disagree with that. Libertarian is more of the root of freedom, to live free. We'll discuss that in a little bit. I'm sure we'll get to that. The thing that really has gotten under my skin lately here in the state of New Jersey is the idea that the governor unilaterally decided to make it a mail-in-only ballot for November. Now, you can get a provisional ballot. Some polling places will be open on November 3rd, but they really are pushing this mail-in vote because it's safer. And there's very few numbers. The numbers are low as far as voter fraud in the state of New Jersey, which, by the way, they just educated. They just had a case in Patterson of voter fraud. You're probably aware with that, Yih-Chau. So there's some people already in trouble in New Jersey with voter fraud. And I thought to myself, why do we have to have this mail-in thing? And maybe when you're viewing or listening, you're thinking to yourself, well, obviously, it's the Democrats' attempt at taking the White House with Joe Biden. But I don't think it's that, especially in New Jersey, which usually goes to the Democratic candidate anyway. I found this very interesting. I did not know that Senator Booker was up for re-election. And I thought to myself, well, if the turnout is low, you'll have, like you did in New York, where de Blasio was somehow re-elected, horrible mayor of New York City. So this increases the odds that the incumbents on the Democratic side of the ticket in the state of New Jersey will be re-elected, and they will stay in power. So maybe that's what's going on. I really have a lot of problems with that. And Governor Murphy's attitude is that the idea of going to the polling booth is a time-honored tradition. And I'm thinking, time-honored tradition, it's our right. And through a stroke of a pen, an executive order, I really feel that my voting right has been taken away because I don't trust the mechanisms of how this is going to play. 6.2 million. Who's going to absorb the cost of that? My renewal for my auto license came the other day, and the letter was demolished because of the wet weather, so I couldn't even send it in. So my whole trust and faith in the system that we have here in New Jersey is about that much, and I'm being generous. What is your take on this whole mail-in voting idea? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it really to protect us from COVID-19? What's the truth, Yih-Chau?
Well, let's take a look at this. All right, let's just go by the numbers. I mean, if you take a look at COVID-19, the death rate from COVID-19 is far less than 1%, right? And if you're taking a look at a less than 1% death rate, even if you take all of those voters out of the equation, okay, what was the error rate? What was the rate of mail-in ballots they actually had to basically throw out in New Jersey? It was upwards of 20%, wasn't it?
I don't know the rates off the top of my head, but I've read reports again and again where you hear numbers like 200,000 had to be discarded, 20,000 had to be discarded. In New Jersey, you have to have it postmarked by 8 p.m. on the 3rd, and they won't be able to have any of the results to the 10th of November. That's plenty of time to get people to count the votes the way you want them to be counted, I guess. I really just don't trust how the vote, who's gonna be the one counting these votes? How are they doing this? Is this by computer? If you do the provisional ballot, they have to vet the vote to make sure that you are who you say you are. How do you do that? And that you didn't send in the mail-in ballot. By the time that is done, the election is over and done with. So I don't understand what the real reasoning is behind it, other than they really just want to overtly commit voter fraud at levels that have previously been just impossible to accomplish. But I don't trust the mail-in voting. And when I say that, I feel like I'm the crazy one in the group. Well, how can you not?
Not at all. I would say that probably most Americans probably don't trust in the mail-in ballot process. So, you might not get that impression reading the news, but the fact of the matter is, I think, a lot of Americans, if not the most Americans, actually have, grave concerns about the validity of the mail-in ballot process. Over here in California, they had to throw out 100,000 mail-in ballots. Signatures didn't match, and just various problems. They had to throw out, I think it was 87,000 ballots over in New York because of various issues. We're talking about 20% of the ballots over in Paterson, New Jersey, had to be thrown out. You had the head of the NAACP in that city basically calling for a brand new election, right? I mean, we have a plethora of evidence that you've got, an open invitation to voter fraud through this mail-in ballot process. So, I mean, there is no question about what the truth is regarding this process. It's open to massive errors. If we're being kind, we can say that it's open to massive errors. But if it's open to massive errors, then that it's open to the possibility of fraud in a large scale, right? So, looking at all of these conditions, you've got to come to understand that people in this country, if you're gonna move forward after the election in November, regardless of which side wins, they've got to be able to believe in the integrity of the election process.
Right.
And if you have one side or the other that loses, and they don't believe that the election was held in a fair and free manner, you're going to have some serious problems, moving forward. If you think the civil unrest in this country is bad now, just wait until you see what's going on with the election results, and then what happens after that.
I think most Americans like things that are fair and square. And when there's cheating of any type, let's even think of football. People are really upset about the Patriots and the Deflategate and the other things that were going on with the Patriots. People don't like a champion that is not fair and square on all levels. You didn't beat them fairly. You didn't beat them squarely. This is from the schoolyard, and I think it's part of who we are as an American. As Americans, we like to be fair about things and even-handed, and we espouse this idea of equal rights, and that even includes voting. And the idea of legislating your voting right, while no rights are, I guess, unlimited, this to me seems a little bit more dictatorial than I'm used to. Totalitarian, my way or the highway. I'm going to decide what's good for you. We didn't have any say about how we were going to do this vote. And you go back to the revolutionary period, I'm sure when they were trying to figure out how we're going to run our country, they thought, all right, let's develop a system that is unlike anywhere in the world, where the private citizen does have that right to vote, and we safeguard that right. And it's always been something that we should deem as precious. Now, we had the primary here, mail-in only, in July, along with the provisional ballots. Again, I don't like the idea of provisional ballots. How do you vet that vote? Are the same people that are telling us that voter IDs are not a good idea are the same ones that are saying that we got to make sure you are who you are when you submit this vote? I mean, that in itself is hypocrisy. I don't know the results of the July primary. Still don't know. It hasn't been talked about. And honestly, when I saw it was the mail-in and all of things, and I detested it, I'm like, I'm not participating in this. It's just a primary. I'm not going to do this. I think that a lot of Americans are not going to fill in those mail-in ballots. That's my prediction. Most people are like, this is BS. We're not going to participate. So the numbers will be low. If the numbers are low, it does favor the incumbent, right?
It does.
In most places, it's going to favor the incumbent. But let's think about the legitimacy of the office of President of the United States. They tried, or I should say, some people tried to delegitimize Trump in 2016 with the Russian collusion. That's all we heard about, and it turned out to be false. I even read in relation to the mail-in ballots, Yih-Chau, I saw articles that said, well, that was a false story what happened in Patterson. So people think that it's not true what happened in Patterson. I live a couple of towns over from Patterson. We know it's true. So you want to talk about false news, there's an example of it right there. When you talk about Russian collusion and how it went nowhere, and they had all of these hearings and we had the impeachment, while we really should have been paying attention to COVID-19 and what was going on in China. But no, let's try to take a legitimately elected person that you really vehemently disagree with out of office any means possible through impeachment. You failed at that. You can't prove the Russian collusion. Is there ever a moment in time where someone would go, look, we did the best of our ability here we thought that we had the evidence. Obviously, we couldn't have a conviction here. Maybe we were wrong. Nobody is ever man enough or big enough or woman enough to say, I was wrong. That didn't happen. And when all the facts are laid out, it still seems that they want to leave the doubt in the air. As we come to this next election, the doubt is going to be magnified by mail-in, which he didn't support the post office. Hey, I got news for you. We do a budget every year, correct? And we have these spending bills. And that's when you're supposed to negotiate where the money goes for that particular year. You just don't all of a sudden, because you think that you want to have a new system of voting, that you have to spend billions of dollars out of thin air. Okay. Why didn't you think about that when you were coming up with the $2 trillion recovery package? They knew that they wanted to do this. It was just part of the plan. So who's lying here? I mean, who's not telling the truth? What is the truth in all of that? What's going on? So this is really a cause for concern for me. I think it destabilizes our country. We don't trust one another anymore moving forward. No matter what side wins, we're going to say it's not legitimate. It's not fair and square by how we play the game here. And I don't think whether you're a liberal, conservative, however you decide that you want to paint yourself, label yourself, you can't look me in the eye and say this is fair and square. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, right? To be perfectly honest, like I've said for a long time, after even before Trump was elected in 2016, I basically predicted and stated so publicly that I think the country was headed towards civil war. Today more than ever, back then we had a lot of people primarily on the left who were who laughed at my prediction, and they're not really laughing now. Even moving forward, if we have this election go the way that you and I are, kind of talking about right now, you're I really feel like we're in the midst of, let's just put it this way. 100 years from now, when history has been written, if we're still around as a human race on this planet, I have a feeling that the way that this period in history will be written as is that we're already in the middle of, or at least the beginning stages of the Second American Civil War. So, I have a distinct bothersome feeling in my gut that this is probably not going to turn around in a way that is probably going to be peaceful, unfortunately.
My view is this: we're pretty much mirroring what happened with the Soviet Union. I don't see any way that 50 years from now we're going to be 50 United States. I think that we're going to break this whole thing up because it's not working. You can't live in an area where the attitude, it's just not, not all of us are the same. We're just not. We're gonna probably look at our friends who we choose as friends. We want people that are more like us, not like than as opposed to not like us, or people that enjoy the same things that we do. And it's got nothing to do with the color of our skin or our quote unquote race. You and I, if we were here both in New Jersey, we'd be hanging out all the time because we have a lot in common, and we appreciate even our differences respectfully. That's what friendship is about. And you don't want to be surrounded by your enemies. That's no fun. You don't want to like be surrounded by people who really want to kill you or take your house or, want to kick your ass as soon as they get the chance. I mean, that's just foolishness. So I just think that the various regions of this country are really night and day, orange and lemons. I mean, what works over in Iowa is not going to work in New York. What flies in New York State is not going to fly in New York City. And what works in North Jersey doesn't, work in South Jersey. Hey, we're Giant fans up here. They're Eagle fans down there, and we hate each other for that. So, well, friendly, just giving an example. Probably the same thing in California. You got factions that, hey, man, I really don't agree with some of these policies. And hey, look at what's happening in our cities. People are flocking out. New York City, now they're begging the rich people to come back. They're not coming back. Why would you come back to that? San Francisco, from what I understand, is really a disaster.
Yeah,
Why don't you
over there?
Why don't you tell us the truth about San Francisco? Because people wouldn't believe it if I said it because I'm a New Yorker.
Well, I don't know if they would believe it if I were to say it either, but literally they've got I think it's 96% year over year in the number of available properties for people to move into, and that's a spike that's unheard of, especially for San Francisco, where property values and rents are just some of the highest in the world.
Yeah, like New York, right?
Yeah, like New York, and this is happening in Chicago. Obviously, when you have these major cities, this is happening in Los Angeles. I mean, basically everybody is fleeing these major Democrat-controlled cities, and they are doing so simply because of these. As it is, before even these riots were occurring, before the civil unrest, before even COVID-19, some of the highest taxes in these local municipalities throughout the entire country, and people already, New Yorkers were already fleeing to Florida, en masse, right? And you already had people kind of escaping, all the high taxes in California by moving to Texas or Arizona or Nevada. And even now, the state of California, the franchise tax board, they actually will come after you if you move to another state and try to flee the state and no longer want to pay state taxes.
Wow. Sounds like the Communist Chinese Party, Chinese Communist Party. They do that with expatriates, right? The people that come from China, they go after them. Yeah. I saw something in the news where either come back home to China or commit suicide kind of attitude. All right, so that's where we're at, right? Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, basically they'll come for your money whether you live in the state or not, right? And California literally has the highest state taxes of any state in the entire country. It's 13 +%. They're talking right now of, because you have so many people fleeing, they can't
right,
budget gaps.
Yeah,
they're talking about basically raising that to I think 16.8%. That is absolutely ridiculous.
Well,
so you got federal taxes on, and then 16.8% on state taxes.
If we want to talk taxes, all right, property taxes in New Jersey are off the charts. I mean, you wouldn't believe it. You'd probably pass out if you saw some of our tax bills. But here's what really gets me. I haven't been in New York City to work in the studio since March, right? Mm-hmm. Why am I paying New York City taxes, New York State taxes, and New Jersey taxes? Do I get the money back? And then if I have to go there, I have to pay tolls and parking tax. Do I get my money back? No, we all know the answer to that. So what is being created around us with this whole idea of just raise taxes to solve all of our issues is short-sighted. And then you just hear one story and see one story after another where the funds are misused. Mm-hmm. By the way, in regard to city taxes, I pay New York City taxes so that when I go to work, I know that I have police, fire, and EMT support. You defund the police, now I have a question. What am I actually paying for? That's not the purpose of these commuter taxes. So
Mhm.
therefore, ergo sum, if I could figure out how to get out of doing that, I'm going to do it as soon as I can. And from my vantage point, if I never go back to New York City to work, that'd be fine by me because I think we're all learning how to work remote. Let's go down some of the stories that are on our minds here at What's the Truth. And this is kind of a funny one because when you told me, I said, "Are you kidding me? He really said that?" Obama shares his troubling private doubts on Biden. Take it away, Yih-Chau.
Well, basically, I guess Obama and his former VP are not as close as either the Democrats or the general public would like to think. Basically, Obama, has privately said to other Democrats, never underestimate Biden's ability to f things up. So, as much as they'd like to put on a brave face, when you basically got the de facto leader of the Democrat Party, Barack Obama, saying that, he doesn't have a whole lot of confidence in Joe Biden, what's the rest of the American public supposed to think?
Well, I just want to know what their end game is. And my observation is this. Usually in these midterm, I call it mid-presidency, the re-election bids for the incumbent, the numbers are against anybody unseating that person. The last time that it happened was George Herbert Walker. And really, he was a third term of Ronald Reagan because in the second part, we all think that George really took over, right? The presidency. And then before that was Carter, who really, from what I remember, first of all, he had to take on a Ronald Reagan who was just seasoned and experienced and just knew how to say the right things in the right moment. And he didn't really get that full support from his base in that Ted Kennedy was trying to beat him in the primary. So you got a split party right there. So those are two examples. Usually the numbers work that, and I've overheard, and I can't say the governor's name, but I know him personally. I overheard him say, it goes back to the Democrats. We take turns. I was governor for 8 years. Now it's going to go back to the Democrats. So there's this wheeling and dealing, and they take turns. Joe, I think, is just okay, let's find, Joe's always wanted the nomination. Maybe he wins, probably won't, but all right, give it to him. Then you pair him up with who you probably on your party thinks this is a good option here with the vice president pick in their mind. Not to mention what Tulsi Gabbard had to say about her and how she really got her good during those primary debates. I really don't think they expect him to win. And I really think that the mail-in ballots are just so that they can have a better chance of keeping all the seats in Congress, because they know as well as anybody else, if they start to lose Congress, if Pelosi is no longer Speaker of the House, then they're going to be in for a lot of trouble and it's going to be 2 to 4 years of, we're going to get even with you bastards. That's what's going to happen. Because I know that a lot of the silent majority are really fuming right now. And if they ever get the chance, they're not going to do what they did when they originally had the majority a few years ago. They're going to say, all right, we're playing for keeps now, because obviously these guys are nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you take a look at, a lot of the left, right? So everybody's, assuming that, Democrats and even the media want, are pushing so hard against Trump because they obviously want, the Democrat Party to win, right? They want Biden to win. But if you think about this, you have to understand it's not really that simple. Okay. So for instance, Antifa and these extreme, leftist activists who are out there, rioting and looting, and, they call them protesting, but, we know the media is literally, lying when it comes to calling these people peaceful protesters. They're not peacefully protesting. Okay. They are literally rioting and they're looting. Okay. What would do you think these people actually really want Biden to win? Because to be perfectly honest, they hate the establishment left. I don't know if that's something that most people understand, but these are people who are typically Bernie supporters. Bernie got screwed in 2016. He got screwed during the primary process here on the Democrat Party side again, here for this election cycle. And, basically, they're looking to install their version or their vision of political power. Mm-hmm. And the fastest way, in their opinion, this is going to happen is not to have, Biden in power, but to rather to have Trump in power. Okay. So a lot of these, Bernie bros, they are actually going to vote for Trump in order to try to upset the Democrat establishment so that moving forward after Trump, or maybe even, a revolution during, Trump's presidency, they're going to try to install their vision of what their political will is. Okay, so in that case, you've got a large swath, the activist base of the left here, who don't actually really want Biden as the president. Okay, and then you take a look at the other side. You look at the media, right? And we both know that the mainstream media is obviously heavily biased towards the Democrat establishment. But even then, you have to understand that as they're declining in viewership and in ratings, what's actually keeping them as high as they currently are, what's ensuring their survival, is essentially the Trump bump, right? So if they didn't have the Trump bump any longer, if Biden were to come to power, that would have devastating consequences throughout the entire.
Yeah, then they become boring and unwatchable. They'd have nothing to complain about. So who would want to even view that? And then they're not only the media as we know it on television and radio, but newspapers. The Daily News, I think, is in big trouble. I think they're just about ceasing operations. That was an email that was sent to me through the Times Square Chronicles. You can look this up, where they laid off the remaining part of their staff and they're going to go online only. This is New York's newspaper. Somewhere along the way, they decided to go way left, and to their demise. Now they're out of business. Now, look, I don't want to ever give the impression that I think that any liberal or Democrat doesn't have some good ideas. I think that they do. And I just think when you could be too far right or too far left, and it becomes almost insanity, right? You can't expect everybody to see the world like you do. And if somebody sees it differently, you don't have to hate them. You just got to go, all right, give me the reason why you think like you think. And if you can tell me at least 3 or 4 good reasons why you believe something, then I'm like, okay, I can respect that. But when all of a sudden I just hear you repeating what is told to you via media over and over again, I have to wonder about your ability to use critical thinking skills, your ability to formulate your own thoughts. What are you, just a programmable sponge? I mean, what's going on here? Who's the sheeple? If you're just repeating everything that your friends are telling you or what you see on Facebook, you got a problem. If your life is just memes and that's as far as you go, or you just look at the headline and you make a decision based on that, then I really got to question your mental stability as a human being. Like, you got to dig a little bit deeper and then come out with some sort of maybe what makes you unique and what can you offer. And by the way, if you're always going to complain about this situation, can you come up with some solutions? Even you can listen to some of these great radio people that we're all familiar with, and all they do is rail against Democrat bad, Republican good, but you're not giving us any solutions of what you would do to make it better. Then you're just basically, the expression is, you're pissing into the fan. You're not really offering any sort of solution. So, as I look at everything going on, I'm very upset about the mail-in voting. I think it's an attack on my right as an individual, my right to vote. And here's my final answer on this. If you're okay to go to the supermarket, social distance, wait online, wear your mask, and respect the spaces of others around you, then you can spend the extra time on that Tuesday morning or whatever time, stand online and cast your vote. There are always people that will not be able to make it to the polling place for a variety of reasons, and that's why we have the absentee ballot. So therefore, it's a choice. But when you all of a sudden unilaterally decide to change the norm and fly in the face of orthodoxy, we have a problem, right? It's not a viable solution. If you're going to tell me a very small percentage of people commit voter fraud, and you're okay with going with the mail-in voting because of that, but at the same time, you're saying only small people are dying as a result of COVID-19. We have to shut down everything. And that tells me that you really are a hypocrite, that, you're making a choice of what small number is more important. I think they're equally important. You don't want to be that one person in the 1% that gets COVID-19. I've heard horrible stories. I live right around the corner where we had 77 elderly people, veterans, die, and the helicopters are flying over us. My daughter witnessed the trucks with the bodies in them. This is real, folks. We don't know what this COVID-19 is. We don't know what the long-term effects are. There's a lot we don't know. It's an RNA type virus. Then you're talking about professional athletes who all of a sudden have heart problems. What we do know, and what I think, is something that's not being said. It's a bioweapon, and it was released on us by China, whether on purpose or accident. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's just say it was an accident, because if we say it's on purpose, it's an act of war. They should be the ones paying reparation. The People's Republic of China, should be making sure that whatever wrongs were created out of their era, just like here in the United States, we would sue somebody for doing such a thing. They have to pay for this. That they're responsible for all of this. In regard to our voting rights, it's sacred, and this is why, one of the reasons why people were willing to lay down their lives in the early 40s and storm Omaha Beach, because that's how precious it was. And I really think we have an obligation, a duty, to make sure that what was sacred to the people before us remains sacred to us today. We should all be equally upset whenever our right to vote is tampered with. That's like, to me, where if you're an American, have that boundary. This is the boundary where even if you're the greatest president of all time, you cannot step over that boundary. And I think that's what's happening with the mail-in voting. And then they politicize it, and they say there's not enough, all of a sudden, not enough funding. They're removing mailboxes, according to who I don't know. And once again, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, is being blamed for the inability of the post office to do their job, which, by the way, we've joked about this for many years. If you want to send something and you want to make sure it gets there, use FedEx. Mm-hmm. I mean, let's just stop the crap here. You and I, we always wonder, anytime we send a mail, a letter, we wonder if it's going to get there. Check is in the mail, never shows up. You blame it on the mail. And by the way, when are we going to get to the point where, mailing's not dependable? Let's just email it in, or let's just vote on the internet, which is secure. Come on. It's just, what is the truth?
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you that I ordered something, a package on, I believe it was August 4th. It was, from a local, vendor over here in California. It's supposed to get to me by the 6th. I didn't receive it until literally Friday. That was 2 days ago. So that would have been the 14th. I didn't get it till the 14th. Couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, I could have driven to the place and picked it up faster than it might as well have gone to China and back.
Okay, and then what about the whole idea of, okay, when we get these ballots in the mail, probably get here by September, I would say, right? In the next few weeks, you mail it in all right away. How soon will it be before people in the news start predicting the winner before November 3rd? That's a problem.
Right.
Okay. How do you know that? I thought that this was one of those processes where they still have to count and wait until, if you put 6 million out, what percentage do you say that, how we close the precincts, or when the precincts report in after a certain amount of time? Mm-hmm. What's that barrier? How does that work? Right. At what point, when you put out 6 million, what's the acceptable return before you say, okay, we can declare a winner? So just a question I have. I don't know. It's just something I'm asking. I think one of the other problems, if you dare ask the question, you get in trouble these days. People want to cancel you. If
Yeah.
you dare answer, hey, what is this protest really about? I was in New York today and I saw some wooden planks on closed stores, and one got me really upset. But I won't make it personal. Let's go to the next story. We already discussed it. That Dr. Pepper makes some great sounds, by the way. Now I've seen these protests. This is from the dailymail.co.uk. And finally, and the way it goes, and I saw your LinkedIn post. All right, we're starting to see the pushback. You had Antifa, BLM, these riots, and now the people on the right are starting to push back. I saw the video. It's really not that many people, but they're trying to make it look like it's a gigantic crowd, like thousands of people. I would say maybe 100, right? Protest rallies turn into battles across the United States. So, Yih-Chau, what is going on here? Can you give us a little bit of an analysis? We all predicted that this would happen sooner or later. Only a matter of time.
I mean, there's only so far that you can push, one side before the other side, basically pushes back, right? So, you've got, these Antifa, activists who, are attacking, their opponents, and their opponents are, at this point, they're pushing back. They're pushing back by, in some cases, it's just firing, paintball guns at their opponents. They have mace. They have, they have pepper spray, but in some cases, there's actually gunshots that are going off. So there's a real escalation of violence. This is not calming down after 80 consecutive days of riots and looting and whatnot. This is actually getting escalated. And when the opponents show up, and these opponents are they're going to protect themselves because they know that at least for the time being they're in the minority. And it's basically gonna. It could very easily turn into a extremely dangerous situation where we have the next shot heard around the world, fired at one of these events. So even if you take a look at a video that was out there documenting Antifa's presence over at Sturgis, right? I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but I think we had about a quarter million.
Well, the only thing I've been getting out of Sturgis is they're not wearing masks and they show the crowd all together. That's all I've been seeing in Sturgis. Well, I don't know anything besides that, but maybe you could tell us what's the truth in Sturgis.
So in Sturgis, they had, some Antifa protesters showed up and, started doing their thing. And, the bikers over at Sturgis wasn't having it. And they were really converging on Antifa. If it wasn't the Sturgis police, basically stepping in and protecting Antifa at that point, we probably would have seen a lot of very, very seriously injured, if not, killed Antifa protesters.
There will be a point where this police will not step in anymore. Yeah, I look at it this way. Have you? You've seen this in NASCAR, especially. The drivers start to fight, and I think that they know that somebody's going to pull them back. And as they get pulled back, they pretend like they're tough guys, and they like swing their arms, like, "Stop me! Don't stop me! I want to go!" At one point, I would like to just see the people holding these guys that want to fight lift up their hands and go, okay, go for it. Beat the crap out of each other. Because if people start doing that, sooner or later, you're going to get tired of that, because no matter who you are in a fight, 9 times out of 10, you both walk away with some sort of scrapes and bruises, and it hurts. You might even hurt your knuckles, So sooner or later, these police officers, and I can't say blame them, are going to go, I'm just going to, you guys figure it out. And then if someone ends up dead, they'll do what most of us would do. I don't know. I didn't see anything. I was looking over. I was tying my shoe at the time. I have no idea what happened. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. Observation in New York City. The after effect of some of these demonstrations, which turned, I would say, destructive. Maybe not so violent, but destructive. There was some violence, yeah. I saw Washington Square and what they did to the memorial for George Washington. And you could still, the cops now are deployed around it. There's gates around it so that nobody can deface it or anything like that. You still see they tried to paint it over, but some sort of F words. It made no sense. If you're gonna put some sort of banner up there or make a political statement, at least make it so it's sensible to somebody seeing it. And I thought to myself, well, this is a little too far and over the top. Why are they attacking George Washington? There was if you look at the crossing of the Delaware when they took on the British, Christmas, whatever year it was, 1775, I guess. I don't remember the year, but Battle of Bordentown and Trenton, there's a black free man at the feet of George Washington, and they named the ear inn. I think his name was John Brown, and he had this place which ended up being the Ear Inn. They have to call it the Ear Inn because they're not legally allowed to have a bar. So they painted over the B, so it says Ear Inn. It's an Irish pub that used to be right on the water line, and they filled it in. My favorite place, boarded up because of the riots. And, I'm not even going to repeat what was written on there, but it was a sad day for me to see something like that happen. Taking it out on the wrong people, the wrong objects, your frustrations. I was having a conversation with my wife and said, here's the deal. Absolutely, you have a right to protest. You do not have a right to destroy property. Even if you think that that statue doesn't belong there, like in Columbus Circle, they had to surround that. What you should do is take your protest to be heard by the right people in front of City Hall, in front of where your representative works, his office or her office, not in the middle of Times Square where you're just hoping you get the right press coverage. That's what this is really about. So the media is feeding into it. They're not helping the matter because they go and cover it. So they're giving them the stage. The stage belongs in front of the people that represent you, not your fellow citizens. That's how you fight for your rights. And you know something? I might disagree with your stand, but I can absolutely support your right to go in front of that city hall, in front of your representative, and speak your piece. You are an American. You have that right. It doesn't matter whether you're liberal or Republican, conservative, whatever you want to label yourself, whatever it is, you have that right to confront the people that represent you and be heard. Mm-hmm. You don't have the right to hurt others. You don't have the right to force your will upon others. You don't have your right to destroy property. That's all wrong. And you're not going to gain support that you think you're going to get by doing such things. You only make yourself look like a monster. That's what it looks like to most of us who are sane. Like, what are you crazy? And if I saw my kid doing any of that stuff, ask my daughter, she'd be grounded for life. How about that? All right. I think we covered that pretty well. This is one for the ages, especially for us New Yorkers. The New York Police Department Union has actually decided to endorse a candidate for president of the United States. So why don't you tell us, Yih-Chau, that developing news story?
Well, I mean, as you know, as everybody knows, in New York, they have the defund of the police movement going, full tilt. You have people who support even a more extreme version called Abolish the Police. And the police have taken $1 billion in cuts just so far. And they've been, their forces have literally been slashed. Violent crime is through the roof. You literally have this escape from New York situation developing, in what was, formerly the greatest city in the world. And the police union is basically fighting for its survival and, trying to somehow with their hands tied behind their backs protect the people of New York at the same time. And they really can't do it. So, out of desperation, they're now endorsing, Donald Trump for president. And, who can blame them? I mean, if you're somebody who's, a rational, reasonable American who, looks at what's going on throughout the entire country, you're thinking this cannot be allowed to continue. What kind of future do I have, or even more importantly, what my children have, my grandchildren have? What kind of world are they going to grow up in if this continues down the road that it's going? So Yeah, I mean, I think the police union is, bold enough and brave enough to come out and be the first ones to say that they're going to endorse Trump in this, hostile political environment. But honestly, I have a feeling that there is a huge swath of American society that may not come out and publicly endorse Trump, but will definitely support him in the election. And who knows what's going to happen between now and November? But as people are getting more and more brave and supporting Trump publicly, even in this in this political environment, we're seeing it inspire others to really kind of stand up, speak out, and really say that Trump is really the answer moving forward themselves.
Well, let me just premise this by saying, usually during the election, believe it or not, I write my own name in, because I just think that there should be another Zachary Taylor of some type in the White House to finish out that term that Zachary Taylor, the general, only got 1 year before he died from eating a bad bowl full of cherries July 4th weekend with some milk. And I'm descended from Zachary Taylor, so I always felt a duty and obligation, descended from that great president, old, rough, and ready, to get into the White House. But let's talk about the choices between Biden and Trump. And does the vice president pick actually make a difference? Does it help or hurt? What does it do for the person in that position? First thing I'd like to get to is why do we see so much? And I have to get off Facebook now. I can't be on Twitter, because I really don't need to be told what to think by people. I really don't need the same perspective each and every day. Why does the left and people who at one point were on The Apprentice and were okay with raising money for their causes, friends of mine who are on the radio right now in New York City, one guy who used to go play golf with him, and as soon as Donald Trump was the presumptive candidate on the Republican Party, all of a sudden he was a racist and he want nothing to do with him. So what kind of friends are you picking? Like when they run for president, all of a sudden they're not cool to be with because they're racist or misogynist or whatever label you want to give them, or very unkind. Why do they have so much hatred for the guy? Question number one. Number two, I remember the same group of people thinking that Bush was an idiot. Now all of a sudden they think he's a good guy. And number three, I really never disliked Obama that bad. It was okay. I mean, I didn't agree with everything he did, but for 8 years he was our president. And, if I was invited to the White House, I would be cordial, say yes, sir. And, I'd be honored. My daughter has an award from President Obama, and it's, with his signature on it. Beautiful signature, by the way. I don't think he's the embodiment of evil. You can disagree with him. Sometimes he can annoy you, but the level of hatred towards this man is, and by the way, if you hate another person that much, you're the one with the problem, not President Trump. So what is with the hatred? Why is it like this? What's the truth about that?
I mean, how far do you want to go back? I mean, at this point, Donald Trump, before he started running for president, before he came down that escalator, he was the guy that, all the rappers, put in their songs and, celebrated, his success as the, American dream. Obama, cited him as, somebody that is a example of American success and the American dream. I mean, you've got countless examples, right, of what is now the modern left, formerly celebrating, Donald Trump. They put him in movies. He did cameos. I mean, the guy was a cultural icon. Now all of a sudden he wants to, run as leader of the free world, and now he's a racist. I mean, the guy's given untold amounts of money to
charities. I know a friend personally who was helped by him. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you've got he's put more money since becoming president. He's put more money into HBCUs, right, the historically black, colleges and universities than Obama did. He's certainly put more money in there. He's got historical, low black unemployment rate, under his presidency. right? Actually, under all minorities, everybody's been raised up in terms of the employment level, as far as salaries go. I mean, everything is really where it needs to be, and the hatred really comes from the left, primarily the mainstream media, twisting his words or intentionally, taking what he said out of context and, kind of running stories for an audience that, doesn't really do much critical thinking. They think, well, I listen to NPR every morning as I drive to work. So what they say must be, the gospel truth.
Well, listen, I know guys in radio that I've had these discussions with, and they always do the same thing. He's an idiot. He's a moron. He's all of these different labels. I'm thinking to myself, how can somebody who's an idiot and a moron end up being a billionaire? How can somebody who's an idiot and a moron actually, become president of the United States? Same kind of thing that they would say about Palin. I've seen this on social media, and this is probably the last straw. When Harris was named vice president, on the ticket with Joe Biden, I saw a lot of people going, finally, a woman that could end up in the White House, all of these nice things. I go, well, what was so bad about Palin? She was an idiot. Oh, all right. What made her an idiot? Because she didn't think like you? That makes her an idiot? She became governor. So what's the problem there? Like, why is it anytime a conservative woman rises up, they're idiots? Or Tulsi Gabbard, she's crazy. Palatable to me, Tulsi Gabbard. I wouldn't be offended if she became president of the United States. What's the problem? Like, why is it if it doesn't fit in somebody's box, it's so offensive? That to me makes no sense. That's where the insanity creeps in to me. You're just not being rational. Okay. With that in mind,
I mean,
there's the hatred towards the guy. There's painting him as a dumbass. But remember, let's go back. And you probably know this, remember better than I do. What's the truth about COVID-19 with Trump? Did he ever say it was a hoax? What part? Where did this idea that the president said it was a hoax come from?
The way that he handled it probably gave the media enough ammunition to say that he's not taking it seriously. And then you have the more extreme elements of the media who's going to basically come right out and, just lie outright, right? They're just going to say, hey, he's saying that it's false or a hoax. And he never did say that. I think his response actually was probably the best response we could have possibly had at the time. I mean, he shut down all flights coming in from China, and really gave us some critical few weeks that really could have exploded the problem well beyond what it is currently, right? So I think if anything, he deserves a meaningful measure of thanks and gratitude from the American people, because he was able to help us have a much less devastating effect from COVID-19 than a lot of other countries actually frankly suffered from. Italy was devastated by it.
And when you look at the COVID-19 situation, there were a lot of inconsistencies, even from Dr. Fauci, who, by the way, said that voting shouldn't be a problem if you follow the proper precautions. Wear a mask, don't wear a mask. How the virus will go away when it gets warmer, which I thought, well, no, that's not true, because there are already places in the United States where it's hot. And so that kind of thinking, I don't know where that came from. The governors of you can't you can't force the governors or all of 50 states as president of the United States to conform to your federal guidelines. It's up to the leader of every local municipality and the governor to come up with a policy. So I've seen a lot of blame and finger pointing, and even Romney the other day said that the president was responsible for all these deaths. And I'm thinking, actually, no, the Chinese are responsible for all these deaths, number one. Number two, you're not talking about all the people that died in New York and New Jersey that were forced into these nursing homes, and the stats were all over the place. Nobody's willing to take the responsibility for bad decisions made on behalf of the elderly that were victimized by all of this, and how they were treated or mistreated. I mean, we had families that couldn't even talked to their loved ones, didn't even know that they were passed on. I mean, this really has been a gigantic mess on so many different levels. And then you open it back up and you see a spike in numbers. But this is odd to me. None of the protests, they didn't see any spike in the numbers with any of those protests because all the protesters wore their masks. Right. Okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah. What else you got to sell me? It's just preposterous on so many levels. They think that most of us are just morons, that we're just going to follow along and go, okay. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you. If you question them, oh, don't question authority. Here's something that is always in the back of my mind. Bruce Springsteen, live 75 to 85. He covers Edwin Starr's War. And before he goes into the war, he goes, blind faith in the government will get you killed. All right. So Reagan was in office at that time. So let me get this straight. Blind faith in the government will get you killed only when the Republicans in office or when no matter who's in office. Another problem I had with is Graham Nash. I had it's just my way of like expressing the thinking of some people. There was a portrait of Nixon on my wall in my studio. This is about, I'm going to say 12 to 15 years ago, maybe even longer. Maybe it could be 20 years ago. I don't remember. And I got it out of the trash and I put it on my wall. I had Nixon right there. So Graham comes in and, he was really against Nixon and some of the music you hear from Crosby, Stills, Nash, like Ohio, Nixon gets blamed for the Kent State shooting. And he looks at that and I could see his face. He's really seething at this point. I go, what? I got that out of the trash. I put it on. He goes, it belongs in the trash. And I thought to myself, it wasn't Nixon who got you into the Vietnam War. It was Lyndon Baines Johnson. You don't hold him responsible at all? Think about that. What happened? So let me get this straight. If somebody of your party gets you into something bad, you're not going to hold them responsible. You just pass the blame on to the next guy and make him the sacrificial lamb. Like it's all that person's fault. Then musically, I'm looking what's going on now. Neil Young, we really need a leader in the White House. I looked at the lyrics and I'm like, I'm not playing this song. I just refuse to go along with that line of thinking that if it's not what you want, then it's absolutely unworkable. I go back to, when President Obama was in the White House. That was our president. We had to do our very best to make it all work. When people said, I hope he fails, I thought, well, that's really a bad attitude to have. No, you want him to succeed on certain levels. In other words, here's what we want to do. We want to have a country that's not involved in any wars where people are dying unnecessarily. We want to have a strong economy, right? We want to have people working. We do want to have good health care, and we want to have products and services that we can depend on that aren't going to get us killed or make us sick. So that's what you want from your leadership, to provide for the health and well-being of the country and the self-defense. All of those things are great. I think we've jumped the shark on so many levels. Like we try to take all of our frustrations and I guess that my life isn't where it should be, so nobody should have it good attitude. And we think that is normal. It's abnormal to me. I think that the psychological factor of what we see around us is also having a negative impact on many levels. And it goes back to, why are you hating this guy? Maybe it's because he upset the apple cart. He really screwed their plans, what they really wanted to do. Maybe those people that are crying New World Order and a one world government, maybe they're not the ones wearing the tinfoil hats. Maybe we're the ostrich with our head in the sand. So why don't you maybe give us your kind of perspective based on what I said, as far as your take on all of this?
Well, I think it really goes back down to the illiberal values that we've kind of developed here in recent memory, right? I mean, we have a party that calls themselves liberals, but they're anything but, and honestly, if anything, me being a libertarian, basically, I'm a classical liberal. I'm somebody who loves having a good conversation, a good debate, right, with people like such as yourself, my niece. talk to my son, find out what's going on in his head, find out, what's going on with, friends who are, on the left. And then, what my friends are thinking, who are in my, in the fellow gun rights community. Right. So, having that broad-based spectrum of, different political ideologies to kind of draw from and kind of find out, what the truth is really when it comes to, a certain policy position or a certain social issue. Those are things that, our founding fathers really value, right? These are things that when they engaged in a robust debate in Congress, they engaged each other in a intellectually honest, good faith, debate. Well, maybe you haven't considered this. Do you understand, where I'm coming from? I'm thinking about what you're saying, and now my beliefs are changing based on, this new information, right? And this is not the kind of, debate that we're having now. Now it's this, gotcha political ideology. You better fall in line. You better shut up. You better, not have a contravening opinion. Otherwise, we could come in and there will be consequences. There'll be personal consequences. There'll be professional consequences, cancel culture, the entire thing, right? And this is just un-American. It's just flat out un-American. Okay.
We started off with the definition of libertas, which means freedom, free thinking, liberal education, free thinking, education, freedom. So if you're going to identify as a liberal and you're not about freedom, you have an inconsistency. There's something,
Their position is 180 degrees from what the reality is, right? If you're a liberal who entertains, you liberally accept that other people
freely accept. Yes,
they're going to have different opinions than you are. They're going to state as much, and then it's up to you if you believe that your position is really the one that really should be closer to the truth. You should argue more. You should speak more. It's more speech, not limitation of speech, right? So these are the principles that made America great. Okay, we have the ability to reason and rationalize, arguments and counter arguments, so that we have a closer approximation of the truth. It's kind of like what you and I are engaging in, right? I'm a libertarian. You're really more conservative than I.
You know what? I really don't define myself either. I'm just like a common sense sort of guy, Thomas Paine. Let's just take everything, and I can't go along with a platform. Because that to me is just it's the dumbest thing, like everything that's on my platform, I'm 100%. Right. I talked to Ed Koch, Mayor Ed Koch, former mayor of New York, one time, and here's what he said. He goes, I'd like to say I agree with you on 100% on all your issues, but not quite, maybe 80%. He goes, anybody that would agree with me 100% of the time is insane. So, if it's a good idea, it should be able to withstand any attack. Now, I think what's missing in liberal education is something that's couched as being boring, and that's philosophy. When you used to go to college, I don't know what they do nowadays, but St. John's University, we had, I think, maybe 12 to 15 credits that we had to get in philosophy. And what philosophy does, it defines what it means to have a dialogue, what it means to have an argument, and what it means to edify, and how you use a sense of fairness and fair play to come to the conclusion or try to edify on the topic, where, we're discussing it until we're arguing in a discussion. It doesn't mean you're angry. An argument is like, I'm presenting my argument. I'm presenting to you why I think the way I do about a particular subject. Could be the existence of God. It could be the existence of oxygen. It really doesn't matter. There's a way of presenting the argument, and how you have to, you're okay to have an opinion, but you have to base your opinion upon some of the facts that you accumulate along the way to get to what the name of this program is. What's the truth? So I don't look at what we do as taking a political side. I'm just questioning what the thinking is. I want to find out what the truth is about all of these stories. You know what? If it turned out that you could tell me without any sort of reasonable doubt that mail-in voting is much better and more fair than what we've done for the past, I don't know, since before World War II. You know, I wasn't around long enough to know how it. I know that certain areas would have write-in ballots, right? And then along came the machines, and then they advanced the technologies, and even those weren't foolproof. I could talk to you about that, but um, if it really is superior, then we should do whatever's the most reasonable and fair way of doing it is really something that we should consider. But it should be all of us who decide that, not one person that says, "Here's how we're going to do it." No, I don't look at you as a ruler. You're the governor of this state, or you're the president of the United States, but you're not my ruler. In essence, you work for me. And
Yeah.
when Washington decided to retire from the presidency, he goes, I now go to the higher office of private citizen. Somewhere we lost that along the way.
Yeah.
I don't want to be ruled by these people. I honestly, probably most of them, I wouldn't even want as friends because I would never be able to trust them.
Mhm.
Right. The people that we have representing us are, I guess, in many ways, a reflection of us. But some of these people, I can judge them by the fruits. They are really going down the wrong path. I don't even think they believe in God or think that there's a hell. They just have they don't understand consequences. I don't know how that comes about. And I'm seeing a generation where everything should be handed to you. Well, you think that you watch MTV, The Real World, that's going to be your life? Really? You're going to live in a beach house and you're going to have, the best body and you're going to have all the looks and well, in order to afford that real world, you have to have a real job, mi amigo. And not all of us are going to be doctors and lawyers and bankers. Some of us are going to have to learn how to be great janitors and good garbage men. Although, now that I look back, I should have taken the test for sanitation in New York City because that is a sweet job, man. Pension is fantastic. I don't know what I was thinking. But we're not all supposed to be these, PhDs and whatever. We're not all going to be astronauts, right? When you're little, like I want to be an astronaut. Who wouldn't? I mean, that's great. Walking on the moon, man, that's got to be fun. But when you realize the work it took to become the astronaut to work on the moon, you realize at one point either you didn't have it physically or mentally to do it. So you had to figure out what you wanted to do in life, and you have to detach yourself from all this material stuff. Because I think that's the root cause. I think it's there is a whole generation of people that are unhappy, delusional, and so they're and rightfully so. The system has failed them. Public schools have failed them. They're not properly equipped. Nobody has taken the time to educate somebody how to have these kind of discussions that we're having right now to edify whatever it is that you want to fight for. Even, equal rights. Yes, absolutely, we should have equal rights, and everybody should be treated fairly under the law, right? But just because something bad happens to you, it's not like you're owed anything for that. My mom, as you know, was murdered right in front of me. Should I get some sort of reparations for that because the state did not do the proper job? Right? I'll just leave that. I'm not even going to debate that issue. So, we all have our problems, but we got to learn. We got to have priorities, and I think Yih-Chau, and I'm gonna just pivot a little bit to use a political expression and really talk to somebody who's listening right now as we talk about these topics in the news. I want you to think about something. If you're unhappy, maybe it's time to look at what you value. Maybe it's time to understand what priorities are. Maybe it's time to discover who you are. Maybe it's time to redefine what your personal foundation is and what are your guiding principles. These are all important things that unfortunately many people aren't taught. Even in the best parochial schools, they're not taught these things anymore because along the way we just thought, oh well, being rich is the most important thing in life. Well, it's not. I know a lot of rich people are unhappy, and we see the suicide rates off the charts. So maybe what's going on around us, the chaos, maybe it's because too many of us have gotten lost along the way. Maybe that's what it really is. And there's nobody that is able to get up in front of the people and just be plain about it. Say, look, I got to tell you something. I think what we're seeing here is just a failure on so many levels. Let's go back and see what do we got on this thing that actually works. To borrow a phrase from Apollo 13, what do we got that works? And anything that's not working, let's figure out how we can make it better. So I think that this is really the root cause of all the turmoil that we're seeing. And the spiritual side of me says because we lost our way with God too. Now, the other part of this that I always have found fascinating with some of my atheist friends, the true atheist to me is not going to get in arguments about what amounts to, in their mind, the tooth fairy. The nasty atheist, I think, is a real perplexing issue for me because they just wanted to, prove me wrong. Hey, listen, hey, can you tell me, do you know that a black hole exists? Yeah, I do. Based on what? Science. All right. Based on what in science? The faith in the scientist. All right. So we're really at the same level of what we put our faith in on many ways, just to give you an analogy. So it's a complex, layered problems from top to bottom. And, I do remember Yih-Chau studying a lot of works of Martin Luther King. And we go back to where this all started, the civil unrest in the summertime. Martin Luther King would have not taken a picture or a video of that moment. He would have flung himself on both the police officer and the man to stop them both from having a bad outcome at the expense of his own. I think it's time to put down the cameras. It's time to stop getting on Facebook and just venting and throwing out names. And we must look ridiculous to the other countries around the world, how we fight over stuff. So that's my 2 cents on that. And we'll get to some of the more of the news that you sent me. But I just want to take a little bit of time just letting people digest that a little bit. Some of the things I'm saying, it's not political. It's just me being Father Zach. That's all right in that.
So, let me just kind of, maybe push back on some of the points that you made, right? So, that, between you and I, I'm a believer, right? I'm somebody who's, Christian. And, for the people who are atheists, I don't want to delve too much into religion, but they call themselves atheists, but it's not really that they don't believe in God. It's really that their God, in many cases, especially now, is, the government, right?
Yeah.
So,
yes.
You've got people like Black Lives Matter. They have an ideology where, they're literally, painting the streets and, getting on their knees and, basically praying to their concept, to their position as a God, praying to their government, wish list as God, right? And that's not that they don't believe in God. It's that their, worship button, so to speak, is, focused on a different God.
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, you could say that for a lot of people who call themselves Christians too. We all have false gods. When you put money before everything else, that's your God. If you put, something that you possess in front of everything else, that's your God. So yeah, we could all be guilty of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just use that as, I find it fascinating, these discussions that I get in the course of having them, the differences. Like a benign atheist, I mean, they're not going to, again, we're going to argue about the tooth fairy. Who does that? It's crazy. But when you get that hostile about it, then there's something really, I check your priorities, man. What's going on inside? It was just an example of the anger that people emote and where it might come from. It's just an example, not to be the subject of, of what we're talking about here. Just like, where's the anger that we're seeing in the streets? Where's the civil arrest coming from? What are some of the reasoning behind that? And I go back to, the education system has failed these people,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, somewhere along the way, the value of philosophy was tossed out because it was unnecessary, but chemistry is more important, or math is more. Well, boy, our math skills suck, but you know what I'm saying? There was no value to that. And this is why you're seeing, you got to feel bad for a lot of people. I do. It comes out of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
There's no proper way for a lot of these people to really get their frustrations out. They can't even identify why they're unhappy. So you see it. You see it in the news. I mean, you see what people are striking out. They're angry. Okay. And the media is fueling into that anger. They're not where they want to be because there's this delusion of what a good life is. That really is it's not, it's the farthest thing from the truth. It goes back to this attachment to the materialism and what I said, like, we can't all be astronauts. What's wrong with being a great janitor? You know, what's wrong with being a plumber? What's wrong with being a mechanic? You know, I was talking to a mechanic a few weeks ago. He goes, I want my kids to do better than me. I want my kids to, you know, really contribute to society. I go, are you kidding me? I go, I have to, if I have to go give last rites, I have to make sure that my car is operating. You're one of the most important people in this community. You keep people going to where they need to go. If he also fixes the local postal trucks, I mean, you don't fix those trucks, they're not going to make. You realize how important you are. How important were the people stocking the shelves or working at grocery stores? They were the essential employees. How important were the nurses? How important were the orderlies that changed the sheets and, you know, did all of that work? So, you know, no matter who you are important. You do matter, and you can contribute. You just gotta like, you gotta like have a good personal foundation. You have to understand what your guiding principles are. That's all. What do you value? What's the most important thing to you? If it's a $300 pair of sneakers, you got a problem. If you think that having that is going to make you, oh, if I just get this, you know what? If I just have this other person in my life, if I marry this, but all my problems will be gone. No, that's not true. You know, you see this with people who get divorced and remarried. They think, oh, this time it's going to work. You know, you bring the same person with you to the next marriage. You bring the same person with you to the new town, and you bring the same person with you to the next job.
Yeah. You know, I agree with you. And conversely, I would just actually even argue that, you know, philosophy is probably the single most important thing you should study in life. You know, I'll be, you know, perfectly honest with you. If you don't know who you are because you haven't thought about, you know, all of the big ideas that kind of lead you to understand who it is that is staring back at you in the mirror, there is no path forward for you. You're literally a ship being tossed about at sea with no destination. Okay. So you'll end up wherever you end up. But, you know, if you understand philosophy, okay, if you study philosophy, then you'll understand, oh, these are all the different big ideas that all of the great thinkers throughout history have really, you know, shaped, you know, our culture, our civilization. And how do those big ideas, you know, how do they shape me, right? How does that person looking back at me in the mirror, what are those, you know, core philosophies that make me tick? What makes me like this particular position versus this particular position, right? It helps me to understand myself better, and therefore I have a more consistent, intellectually, you know, honest way of looking at the world based on who I am and my place in it. But if you don't even have that, how are you going to get married? How are you going to be with somebody who, you know, if you don't know who you are, how are you going to fit in with somebody else, right? How are you going to make a life and really walk down that same path together, right? If you don't know who you are, how are you going to interact with the people that you work with, right? How are you going to be able to handle a trying situation that hits you, you know, that blindsides you, you know, at 3 p.m. on a random Tuesday, right? How do those things, are you just going to be that individual who gets blown by the direction of the wind, or are you going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to plant myself firmly here. This is who I am. This is what I believe. This is how I have my place in the world. This is where I've staked my claim, and this is how I'm going to defend it, right? If you don't have those core philosophies, you're not going to be able to move yourself forward in a meaningful way. You're not going to be able to contribute in a meaningful way to society. And you're really not going to have a legacy to kind of leave behind. Right. So I would venture that of all the things that are probably important to learn in life, philosophy should absolutely be, you know, one of the very, if not the very top of that list. And, you know, really, even among those of us who have studied philosophy, right, you know, here in America, you know, the big void that people don't understand, especially as it relates to our current issues with China, is that we studied certain names about Eastern philosophy, like Lao Tzu, Sun Tzu, Confucius. You know those names, but do you know what their underlying philosophies really are? As Westerners, I would challenge you to say that most of us don't.
Yeah, and I would go further in saying, hey, if you think socialism and communism are really good ideas, maybe you should read about the thinking about some of those leaders of those parties, right, or those systems, and find out all the damage that they did and how many people died and what happened to the people who disagreed with them. Do you want that here?
Yeah.
This idea that socialism is a panacea of all of, I just that's baffling to me. Again, it comes from a point of ignorance. I think people really don't understand. Um, Having said that, let's move on to some of the other stories. While we were fighting over various issues here in the United States, and while Joe Biden picked Harris as his running mate, something happened in the Middle East that got no coverage, where President Donald Trump was able to have a peace accord or peace agreement made with the UAE and Israel. Now, as a result, which is huge, okay, now as a result, you have Iran again popping off, making some threats. What's going on with this peace agreement in Iran?
So, it's just like you said, right? We have a historic peace agreement that has been established between, basically that was brokered by the United States, brokered by Trump, really, between the UAE and Israel. And it's something that I think both sides gave some concessions. UAE, they basically claim that they were able to broker quite a few concessions from Israel in regards to how they might be able to help the Palestinian people maybe establish their own nation state basically in the future. And this is a huge foreign policy win for President Trump. And of course our left-wing mainstream media is not giving, or virtually not giving him any credit at all. And some are just they just flatly deny this being as historic as it is. And how you can really determine whether or not it's actually historic as some sort of peace accord is what the opposition says, right? If you got Iran coming in and saying, hey, we're gonna there's going to be consequences for the UAE for adopting these positions. The Revolutionary Guard and their president over there has basically threatened the UAE for their position. Over in Turkey, Erdogan has made similar public statements where he hasn't necessarily threatened them, but he's strongly kind of condemned the developments in regards to this peace accord. So that in and of itself should tell you exactly how historic this is. When you've got members of the opposition who want to do anything and everything to prevent peace from occurring in Israel and throughout the Middle East, it tells you the level of threat that this peace accord actually really represents. So congratulations to President Trump for this historic peace accord. And he should absolutely get the foreign policy kudos that he absolutely deserves here. So yeah, I mean that's pretty much what's happening over in Israel and the UAE.
It's still a troubling area to me, where Erdogan, they recently took Hagia Sophia and made it into a mosque. I don't know how much more Erdogan can push it before there's going to be some major blowback. And, people aren't paying attention. There are things going on between Russia, Turkey, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. It's more than just religion. There's politics involved. And recently in Belarus, there were things going on. This is really a tinderbox that could erupt into a major war where it's gotten back to me through some channels. A statement like this was made: we can certainly turn Istanbul back into Constantinople. I want you to think about that for a second. If you understand world history, that is saying a lot. So that is still a very dangerous situation. I don't know long-term what could happen. Hopefully not much, but we're just that far away from major wars breaking out all at the same time. We'll get to China and what they're doing right now, which is also, I guess, a bit that we should concern ourselves with. But what was about a week and a half ago, the blast in Beirut. I have never in my life seen an explosion on that level, and a bunch of questions just went off. I mean, what was a ammonium nitrate doing in that quantity right next to a fireworks plant? They blamed it on some welder who accidentally set the whole thing on fire, which I'm not buying because most welders are pretty, they're artisan. They understand their craft. They're dealing with explosives all the time. You think that they would know better, right? So, and then people were taking some video of it. After a while, I just gave up trying to figure out, like, maybe a cruise missile went in there. Uh, I have no idea what happened in Beirut, but the fallout is still, taking place where they're requesting a new form of government. People are not happy. So that is something interesting to look at. At the same time, when you had that explosion, I'm seeing explosion. It was a major explosion in Russia, a couple here in the United States and throughout the world. Are these anything that we should be concerned about? These explosions? Is some sort of message trying to be transmitted, or is it just a coincidence?
I mean, look, you got unrest, going on all over the world. I mean, this thing with Beirut. I mean, you're right. I took a look at videos from several angles, and that was like a little mini Hiroshima that went off over there.
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. But also, you want to kind of keep in mind, right? I'm sure the laws in that country don't give you, like the HASCOM laws that we have here, or the or any of the requirements by law to kind of separate dangerous chemicals from each other and have the right, personal protective equipment, and all that stuff that we have here, that is governed by Cal OSHA, and helps to protect us from accidents and devastating incidents of this magnitude from happening here in the United States, are probably nowhere near being instituted at any reasonable level over in Beirut.
So the lack of oversight, and then I can understand why the populace is so mad at the government. Like,
yeah,
what are you doing? Like,
yeah.
That was just
they probably don't know. Hey, maybe we shouldn't put some highly flammable material that's explosive right next to like where we weld stuff.
Yeah, I don't understand that one for the life of me, and unfortunately, the devastation. But I'm glad to see on one side of it where Israel and other countries, they were just willing to help. I mean, that's what we should do. I remember at one time there was a devastating earthquake in Iran, and even we wanted to help them out. I think they turned us away, but that's what being good neighbors is all about. Who are our neighbors? They're like 3,000 miles away, 5,000 miles away, 10,000 miles away. We should always respond to those kind of situations with charity. Love thy neighbor is one thing. Love thy enemy, we're also commanded to do, and that's really difficult for us to grapple with. Now, China, really interesting. I've been hearing about bubonic plague, and I've been hearing about spikes in COVID-19. Then you have the movements of the Chinese military, the naval forces in the South China Sea. It seems to me like Taiwan is indicating that there are more aggressive moves being made towards them. We have a treaty that we will come to the defense of Taiwan. And I think we even have become more aggressive in turn. If the People's Republic of China thinks in any way, shape, or form that we have weakness, you know Asian philosophy probably better than me. If we show weakness, or if we give any indication that we're not willing to stand up for something, they will move in, and they won't think twice. So this is really a dangerous point in our history. And like you said earlier in the broadcast, I don't even know if we'll be around 100 years from now, the way things are going. What's your take on that current situation?
So let me just kind of preface that by saying that even amid all of these aggressive actions that are occurring through China and and our neighbors, China's actually in a really, really bad spot right now. I don't know if you're aware, they've had massive flooding. They've had some dams that were on the threat of breaking, and potentially just drowning whatever's downstream. They've had, massive, all kinds of, weather patterns that are, frankly, really kind of strange, and, being Chinese and kind of understanding Chinese history, I can tell you that, you probably studied this a little bit when you were, either in high school or maybe, intermediate school, but they talked about the mandate of heaven, right? So, it used to be where during imperial times you would have, the people would see whether or not a current ruling emperor was valid in sitting on the throne by seeing what heaven did, right? So if heaven through all these types of natural disasters, if there were like plagues and locusts and floods and all kinds of crazy stuff, then that tells the Chinese people, hey,
wrong dynasty
no longer has the mandate of heaven. Okay, so that's basically what's going on now. You've got locusts and plagues. You've got you got whole entire crops being wiped out. You got floods, dams about to break, all kinds of just crazy stuff happening throughout all of China. So, as aggressive as China wants to, be, and as much as they want to, rattle their sabers, so to speak, they're not really in any position to be doing any saber rattling. I can tell you, if things really get out of control on the inside of within China's borders, you're really going to have some problems that the CCP, the Communist Party, is not going to be able to control. So, the last thing they should be doing is pissing off Russia, fighting border disputes with India, doing daily flyovers with Taiwan. I mean, they shouldn't be doing any of this stuff right now. They should just kind of, just sit back, chill, see if they can, control some of the domestic issues that they're kind of suffering from. But apparently that's not what they're doing. And I can tell you that, one, that's a sign of desperation, right? It's kind of saying, oh my God, we've unleashed COVID-19 world, and we've got to go through this wolf warrior diplomacy strategy where if somebody attacks us, we're going to attack them hard right back, right? I can tell you that only gets you to one place. That one place, it's going to be China against the world. I don't care how powerful China is. I don't care how powerful the Chinese Communist Party thinks that they are. They cannot take on every single other country in the world. And that's
honestly, they can't really take us on either.
No, they can't.
It's really, I've gotten these discussions. There are things that I do know, militarily speaking, that I really don't want to talk about on a public forum, but rest assured, we have the capacity to do things that people would never expect us to be able to do. I am not in fear of any other country that can come up against us. Really, we could take our licks, but we definitely would. In the end, we'd win. I just know that. I analyze even Russia. The idea that there's some sort of threat. It's not true. It just looks bigger than we do in the map. That's basically what you have. You might say, oh well, there's a billion. Military. There's a billion in their military that we'd have to, fight against. So like, well, I remember being in the Army, and the odds weren't in our favor. It was a 10-1 shot, and we all thought we could win that. So, I think we're okay in that regard. I think you're right. I think it shows that internally they're weak. They're going to have to, sooner or later, I think Hong Kong, with the ability and a long history of being a free market, I would expect that somehow, some way, Hong Kong will be able to navigate more freedom for the people of China down the road. I just have that feeling. I could be wrong. You might have better insight than I do.
When it comes to Hong Kong, I'm glad that the UK, and I think that even to a certain degree the US is stepping up and saying, hey, maybe we can have somebody come over and emigrate over to us, because obviously China's no longer honoring their commitment to do a full integration. I think it was like 2049 or 2045. They're basically violating that pact, that agreement that they signed prior to us handing, or the UK handing the Hong Kong back to them. Unfortunately, with the way that Hong Kong is kind of seen as kind of like that international jewel, throughout the entire world media's eyes, China has no choice but to try to save face in trying to demonstrate their power, their like iron grip, their iron fist by controlling Hong Kong to the degree that they are, right? I mean, even writing laws to basically criminalize anybody throughout, not even within Hong Kong's borders, but anybody throughout the world who speaks ill of the CCP, is automatically guilty of committing crimes against that
Oh
state.
yeah.
So
you and I are in a lot of trouble with the CCP. Lots of trouble.
Yeah, I'm not worried, but regardless, I can tell you that having these ridiculous laws that you're writing where the jurisdiction is the entire globe, these are not the actions of a sane, rational thinking administration. Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. So that law alone, the national security law alone, tells you exactly what's going on in the heads of these CCP leaders. Okay, they are desperate. They are, they're lashing out. These are the actions of madmen, right? Mad women, and they cannot be, God forbid they should ever seize power, but it should tell you from a strategy standpoint, a standpoint of Sun Tzu through the art of war, that there is a great amount of distraction and emotional disconnection on the part of your enemy, and that's what you can take advantage of, right? And it's kind of like what you and I were talking about earlier about the difference between Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. Yeah, we might be very well versed in Western philosophy. We might think about Plato and Socrates and all these great thinkers, Thucydides, all these guys, what they came up with, right? But do you understand the flip side of the equation? Do you understand what Taoism is? Do you understand what Confucianism is? Do you understand how the art of war and Sun Tzu descended from Taoism? Okay, without Lao Tzu, there is no Sun Tzu. And Sun Tzu was the greatest military strategist the world has ever known, right? So do you know enough about all of these subjects to be able to effectively strategize a winning game plan against somebody who does know what these great philosophers on the Eastern side are all about, right? And unfortunately, I can say if there's one big strategic weakness on our side, on the Western side, it is that. It is strictly that. I took a course when I was at Berkeley. It was a military course about the art of war, and I can tell you that the understanding on our side about what the art of war really is infantile.
Yes, I would agree. Look, I can give you points in history where us thinking differently than the rest of the world, we used it to our advantage. And you can just go back 240 years ago in the middle of the Revolutionary War, where you had the British troops amassing on the fields and fighting like it was a European theater, where we're fighting like savages, as they would say. We borrowed from the indigenous population their style of warfare. We knew the topography, we knew the land, we knew the vantage points, all of those different things. Plus, we had a shorter communication line. Our leaders were all local. They had to communicate via ships, right? It would take weeks before they get communiques from command in the UK. And, we were able to live off the land. And you just can't get out there and fight a musket battle like it's the War of 18, what's going on between, Waterloo. You can't fight a Waterloo style battle in the middle of, the United States. You really have to know your enemy. You have to study them. You have to. I asked one guy who fought in Vietnam, I go, how did you survive that? And he gave me this stare. He goes, I smelled like them. I sleep like them. I lived like them. He never took a shower, because you could smell soap in the jungle. You could smell your enemy if they're using soap. So these little things that people have no idea about when you're fighting battles, I mean, that they do make a difference. You ate the same sort of stuff that they ate. You didn't think twice about eating bugs or whatever was available. If you had to think like your enemy, what were they do? So, right. I mean, if you look at how we play football, the coach is calling plays based on what he thinks the tendencies of his opposition are. So he's going to, if they're really good at defending against a 38 sweep, well, you'd be an idiot to call a 38 sweep. So just do a run to the other side, or do a down and in, or whatever you want to call it, post pattern. You gotta attack them on their weakness. So yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just one of those things. I think as much as we underestimate our enemies, and let's just say China is a threat, as much as we underestimate them, they in turn do underestimate us.
Right, but you can't understand a key difference. Okay, the key difference is they send their best and brightest to study our ways here.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, we do not do the same on our end over there. Okay, the people that we send over there to study are just they're kind of hobbyists. They're just kind of, oh, China's kind of fascinating. They're different. Let me go and find out what they're all about. Okay, there is no like strategic initiative to study their ways and leverage their strategies to our advantage.
You're right about that. Yeah.
Okay. So you have to understand, these are when you're talking about the underlying strategy, and this goes back down to even basic things, right? Like things that I talk about, like on LinkedIn. A lot of the people on the left, they keep saying, hey, kind of like what you were saying earlier. Oh, Trump's a dumbass. Trump is stupid. Let me tell you something. Okay, if you truly understand the art of war, if you truly understand and have studied Sun Tzu, okay, you understand and you see exactly what Donald Trump is doing. Okay, It tells you when you are weak, pretend that you're strong, appear strong. When you are strong, appear weak. Right? When you are smart, appear stupid.
Oh yeah, come on, that's the biggest play in the principals used to do that when I went to boarding school. Play dumb, like you have no idea what's going on.
Absolutely.
Here's the other thing: the ability to effectively cause a ruse to draw your opponent out in battle. It's like playing chess. What he did in Syria, remember, we're withdrawing all the troops. They went nuts. They went batty. Even Tulsi Gabbard said, "Oh, we shouldn't be doing this." What happened soon after? The biggest target was out in the open, and we were able to get rid of that biggest target. So, that to me tells you all you need to know about how good of a chess player you're dealing with.
Yeah,
I think that's another thing. Who even plays chess nowadays, right?
Right. But think about this: how many times has Trump said something that was stupid? The left has allowed their guard to drop, and then somehow magically he lands on his feet and comes out with a victory. How many times has that happened?
Well, like it's almost as if there's a crease in the page and you can't even straighten it out no matter how much you try. Let's move to some of the other stories, because we're going to run out of time too. You know why? I smell spaghetti and now I'm getting hungry. So we're going to pick up the pace a little bit. The Ninth Circuit ends California's ban on high capacity magazines. Now, this is surprising. What's happened to the Ninth Circuit? Usually they were, I guess you might say, the more left-leaning of all the circuits. What's going on? I see a big change. What's
they used to call the Ninth Circus, actually.
Right. Yeah. It used to be a laughing stock. Right.
So let me tell you what happened. Trump started installing judges that he liked, that had a more constitutional bent to their rulings. And about a third of the court now is a bunch of constitutional conservatives. So this 3-panel judge that ruled 2-1 in favor of striking down that Standard magazine ban gave us the victory that we've been fighting for decades. And that's a huge win for conservatives and libertarians, because that's going to give us the court precedent to challenge other similar court cases that have been ruled in other blue areas of the country. Like in New Jersey, I'm sure they have a 10-round limit or a 7-round limit, I think in some instances. So you can use this court precedent to say, okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and use this as an argument in court over here to try to drive the same result. And then you have too much of a dichotomy, then of course it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says, well, you've got the Ninth Circuit over here who's ruled this way, and we've got the Seventh Circuit over here who's ruled the opposite way. It's up to us as the Supreme Court to really reconcile this as the final word on this issue moving forward.
All right. And then when you think about this, what really weakens one of the sides in this is I see these mass demonstrations, these people that are rioting, if you will. All of a sudden, they're armed to the teeth with high-capacity magazines, and they're the people that you're supporting. And what are you going to do now? So that really gives you puts you in a bad position where like, you got to be kidding me. Your guys are out there in the streets with high round magazines with these, and you know what? Assault rifles, these military weapons, which is kind of makes me laugh because they're not really military weapons.
Yeah.
Some of them are 22. 22 is like, I mean, it could be lethal, but it's not something that you really worry about in guns, right? Anyway, so it weakens their position about these high magazines. And by the way, if you have to defend yourself against crowds like that, then you need a high magazine. In fact, I would say get an M50 machine gun to make the most of it. For those listening, and really, I think most of us who, once I got out of the Army, I had to clean those things so many times. After a while, you're like, you know what? Just to own them is just a pain in my ass. So I don't need it. I like to think that I got these, and I'm skillful and I'm just wired differently than most people. If you're going to have them, you have to be very responsible. You have to know how to use them. And I think you should qualify with the weapon on a regular basis. Make sure that you're keeping everything safe, because you know what? You can make bad decisions that will end up in tragedy. So you always have to be on guard. You got to be smart with these things. Having said that, I don't think people really understand when they say assault weapons, the difference between an assault weapon and maybe an M16 or, high capacity magazines. Can you just give us a little bit of a definition of what assault weapons are and what regular weapons are? And also, by the way, there's different regulations for rifles that you use for hunting and handguns. So just give us a little bit of overview of all of those different things. Because I think when people, they think assault weapons, I think there really might be a misunderstanding of what that means.
Absolutely. So assault weapons is actually just a huge PR propaganda victory for the gun control lobby. There's no such thing as an assault weapon. Okay. There are assault rifles. Okay. Assault rifles are, select fire, fully automatic, rifles that are, you commonly used by the military, right? Your M16, like you were saying, M4, that shortened version of the M16, the AK-47, those are all assault rifles. Okay. Assault weapon is basically a term that the gun control lobby, kind of coined, basically made up and, tried to, paint owners of an AR-15 or a semi-automatic AK-47 as, having military grade equipment. They don't. Those are semi-automatic. One trigger pull equals one, round fired. Really those semi-automatic weapons are no different than, what everybody believes to be like a common handgun technology, right? So, if you have a handgun and you're using it, to defend yourselves and your loved ones at home, those are one trigger pull and equals one round fired. So, it's really no different in terms of what the AR-15 and, common, handguns, that technology is shared. Right. It really only becomes what is considered an assault rifle when you have a select fire, the ability to select a mode where you can hold back the trigger pull and a stream of rounds get fired until
right.
you release that.
Basically, the machine gun effect. Ba 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 ba. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Right. So that's the difference. And really gun control is a losing proposition in today's day and age. Everybody now, all of a sudden realizes the truth that the conservatives have been trying to tell them this entire time, all these years, right? That, they need a gun to defend themselves because they see just how quickly society is devolving all around them. I mean, they literally watch it happen.
You just defunded the cops. I mean, you better be able to defend yourself now at this point.
So, they're watching a Democrat party that is literally trying to defund the police. Okay. And then they're releasing convicted felons out of prison due to COVID-19 by the tens of thousands, by the way. Okay. Yeah. At first, they told you these were nonviolent felons, and then they're releasing murderers, rapists, and
yeah. And Bill Cosby's still in jail. Right? I'm like, wow.
Right. And so they're releasing all these and then defunding the police. And now they're telling you, oh, you can't have any guns. We're going to do whatever we can do to make sure you can't get your hands on any guns to defend yourselves and your loved one. What is that? Does that sound like a government of the people, by the people, and for the people for you? Is that what you would think of as a government that has the best interest of their constituency at heart?
What that is a government that really thinks very lowly of the average American's capacity to make decisions on their own, and that they're needed. So, it's one of those, we'll create a reason why you need us situations. That's the way I look at it. And obviously, it just basically confirms the fact that, hey, I know what I'm doing, but the rest of you are all idiots. So I'm going to have to legislate every part of your life to make it comply to my wishes. It doesn't speak highly of the citizenry when you kind of have that orientation to them. Maybe you're afraid that when they find out what you're doing, they'll come for you. Maybe there's part of that to it. I will say this: the reason why Adolf Hitler didn't invade Switzerland is because he knew that every citizen of Switzerland was armed, and it would be a bloody disaster. And I've read comments from the Imperial Japanese Navy and their army that taking the United States would be a military disaster because they thought each one of us had a gun. So, there is pause from other countries outside looking in that say, well, I don't think we want to mess with these people. They seem a little bit, they're armed, and that makes them dangerous. So I think the government should fear us. We shouldn't fear the government.
Absolutely. They're called public servants for a reason. I mean, you touched on this earlier, right? They're there to serve the public. I'm the public. You're the public. They're here to serve us. We're the boss. They do not rule over us. That's not the intention.
It's morphed into a ruling class. And I think a lot of these people, even AOC, all right, I get it. She had a message for whatever, whatever her roots are her roots. But this is the beauty of America, where you could be anybody and run for office and have your ideas and possibly get enough people to vote for you. And then you represent those people who put you into office. But I think like her and many others, they lose sight of why they're there to begin with. And maybe that's the discussion where I've always thought term limits are definitely the way to go. I'm so glad we have that for president, because that would be really dangerous if, we had a repeat of even FDR, as great as he is, to get in the mindset that nobody else could do that job is where a democracy fails. It's where a republic fails. It's why Russia will ultimately fail. For some reason, they think they can't move on from Putin at this point. I think that's just a dangerous way to think. You lose who you are as a nation when you get to that mindset. The politicians, they make too much money, and they get too much power, and they're lauded a little bit too much, and then they start to believe the press clippings, and then you got a monster on your hands. So, I think that might be. I hope, if anything, that one day we'll all get to the point where the public demands term limits on all offices. It comes up to some sort of solution. I think that's the only way to save ourselves from these people.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that. I mean, I think that overall the system that the founders put together is pretty solid. Obviously, over time, over the last 250 years, people have creatively been able to find ways, to kind of take advantage of the system, right? You're always going to have that. That's the way.
Always looking for the loopholes.
Yeah, absolutely, right. But they say that empires. I mean, historical precedent, generally dictates that empires rarely last over 250 years, and we're kind of pushing on that a bit now. So we can either save the republic by having the rational, reasonable, patriotic Americans stand up now and really push back against a lot of this onslaught from the left against our country, our culture, and our values, or we're just gonna sit back because we've become way too soft over 250 years.
I just wanted to say that I think we're all a little bit too lazy on so many different levels. You could be lazy, I could be lazy, we all could be lazy, and we have lazy politicians. And I'll give you an example: the ACA, what we call Obamacare. I don't know what's in it, but we'll have to wait to find out. Remember that? We'll have to make it a law to find out what's in it. I think that along the way, there's always that one politician who goes, you know what? I'll take care of it. All right, well, as long as you're going to write it, then okay, I'll support it. They don't even bother what's in there. So one person does all the work, a couple people do all the work, and then the rest of them all get behind it without reading it themselves because they're just lazy. And the next thing you know, we've got a behemoth on our hands that we just can't get rid of or make any sort of changes to help correct it because of the way it was written. You can't blame the guy who wrote it or the people that wrote it or the girl who wrote it. You can blame the other lazy politicians who didn't take enough time to really go over it. The preamble looks fantastic if you ever read it, but when I started to read the details, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. I don't like this part. Well, what's that doing in there for? An indemnity clause for vaccines during pandemics is one of the issues with the ACA, where the manufacturer of the vaccine will be indemnified if it ends up hurting or harming people. I mean, you got to think about these kind of things. So don't be in a rush for, let me just say this. It's another controversial thing. Please just think before you take some, vaccine or shots. I mean, if we're really good at vaccines, we already would have a cure for HIV. We don't. If we're really good with vaccines, Ebola wouldn't even be a topic of discussion anymore. One final article we're going to get to, and then we have to wrap it up because I'm really hungry for the spaghetti that is waiting for us downstairs. Hillary Clinton says that she's ready to serve in Biden's administration. Wow. All right. Well, it's really nice of her to make the offer, but when you heard that, what were you thinking? It's like, is she going to place herself in a position where all of a sudden, hey, I'm president of the United States? Like, what's going on here?
Well, let's not mince any words. Okay. First of all, if Joe Biden does indeed, turn out with the official, Democratic nomination, which I believe there's probably no other chance that anybody else could at this point. We're not electing Biden. We're electing Kamala Harris. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, Biden has the mental acuity of.
All right, let's not, you know what? Let's not make fun of him for that, because this is really the fault of his own party to allow somebody that is just, he's got some problems. I'm not going to make fun of him or anything like that, but obviously something is not right.
Yeah.
I almost think that what if something happens to him and he cannot, what if something happens? Already the ballots are printed out. His name is on it. He's a presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party. What happens if he's incapacitated at election time? Mm-hmm. Then what are we dealing with here?
We're dealing with Kamala Harris.
Maybe. Because you haven't, you don't know. It really becomes the party machine will make whatever switch they want to make. Mm-hmm. She's been chosen as a running mate. She's not chosen as the nominee. So that brings a lot of things into question after the election. And if something, God forbid, happens to President-elect Biden, then that's another issue altogether. Then she obviously would be filling the role of president because the election is done. Okay. And even then, I'm not so sure, because you have the process of the Electoral College in December after the election, if you remember. So we're new territory, I guess. I don't think we've ever experienced anything that could possibly happen like that, but it's floating out there. Listen, I don't want anything bad to happen to the man. You just don't want to wish that on anybody. But I just really, I'm wondering, this is the best that they could do, right? Okay. So what is Hillary's play here? What's going on?
Hillary's just basically saying, hey, if you call on me to help out, I certainly will. And I can tell you that if there's any, Americans in the political middle left, they're going to look at this and they're just going to be like, oh, well, I wasn't sure if I was going to vote for Biden or Trump, but it's Trump all the way now. I definitely don't want, Hillary Clinton.
Okay. Oh, that's a very interesting point. So, all right. What is Hillary really doing? Is she trying to get people not to vote for Biden because Kamala Harris would be the first female vice president? What's going on there?
So, honestly, your guess is as good as mine, but, Hillary just does not seem to get the hint that nobody wants her around. I mean, between, Benghazi and all these, other foreign policy just disasters that, have happened under her belt, either during Obama's presidency or even during, times when, she was the first lady. I mean, obviously, I think most people understand that a lot of the policy positions that she adopted were not necessarily identical with those of her husband. And, she was actually, she probably ran a lot of those decisions right through because of, who she was as the first lady, right? So a lot of these things that, kind of have been policy positions that have turned out to be, nightmares that have come back to, not only haunt the Democratic Party, but, the American people in general, have come directly from Hillary Clinton, right? Who was the person who called, a lot of the blacks, people in the black community, the super predators, right? I mean, this is all, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton legacy that is coming back to haunt the entire Democrat Party, right? We don't want somebody here, quote unquote, helping the new administration. She's part of the problem. She needs to, go away, silently and just kind of fade away. And apparently that's just not something that she's capable of doing.
Do you think that there's any part of her is trying to sabotage Joe Biden? I mean, I don't, it's magnanimous of her. I mean, she was the Democratic nominee against Trump in 2016. And, usually you don't find anybody that has lost like she has willing to participate on that level, especially after you've had your run as Secretary of State. I mean, it's just an odd thing. It would sort of be like, somebody like, I'll tell you, back in history, this is very fascinating to me. When Ronald Reagan was about ready to take the nomination in 1979, 1980, whatever the year, 1980, there was a discussion with Gerald Ford and the possibility of Gerald Ford joining Reagan as his running mate, vice president again. I mean, here's a guy who was president. Now he's going to be in a position of vice president. I was fascinated by that. I thought that would have been the coolest thing because I've never seen that in history. So I'm just like, I'm fascinated by her willingness to serve a Biden-Harris administration, what role she sees. To me, it's sort of interesting. At the same time, I could see your point where, wow, that really, like, if people are really going to vote for Biden by her putting her name in there with that, they're like, oh, no, I've seen this play. I don't like this play. I want out of this. It's a boring show. I can't watch this again. I can't erase the last time from my mind. I don't want to see a do-over. That's for sure. Very interesting. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens in the next few weeks. I would imagine, because I got to get to the spaghetti, I'm sorry, but I would imagine that at one point there's going to have to be some sort of legal challenge to go through the courts for these mail-in only ballots, or even the idea of provisional mail-in. How could this go unchecked?
Well, the Democrats are convening an emergency session to, bring in the executives at the USPS to, kind of grill them on, what's been going on. What do you plan on, doing to make sure?
Great, another hearing.
Yeah. So it's going to be another hearing. But real quick before you go, there's two things that I think, our audience really kind of needs to know about before we kind of check out for this episode. So one is Trump is looking to potentially pardon Edward Snowden. Okay. And that is a huge development because up until this point, I think Trump hasn't actually had many great things to say about Snowden. Obama obviously was, very, very unhappy about Snowden. So in my opinion, as a libertarian, I can tell you that I believe that Snowden is a patriot of the very highest order. He exposed things that I think the general public really need to know about in regards to, government surveillance and the leveraging technology against us as the people. And I think he, even though he exposed some of our intel secrets to the world, I think that overall his contribution to, our culture and how we value openness as a society is immeasurable. And then the other thing is I want to make sure that our audience knows that things have gotten so completely out of hand in Seattle after, basically 80 consecutive days of just rioting and looting that, the Black Lives Matter protesters are now, basically calling for, white people to give up their homes to the Black community. And this is an alarming development. This is something that, not too long ago we saw over in South Africa and, You know,
Oh, well, yeah. I mean,
I mean,
it's bad. It's bad in South Africa. People are being slaughtered over that.
yeah, this is bad stuff. So this is the precursor to it. I want to make sure that our audience knows what's going on, what the historical precedent is, and where this road leads, kind of moving forward if they don't put a stop to it. If we don't take a look at this and really call out that extremism for what it is, very, very bad things could happen as a result.
I think what we should do next week is talk more about the Snowden situation, what intelligence has been compromised. I will say this, and I have a very interesting background, and I have ties to many different people. To assume that our adversaries aren't aware of our intelligence methods is really, it's kind of borderline a joke. Okay, so whatever was, I guess, exposed, believe me, they already knew, or they were very close to finding out. So it's not earth shattering. The connections of what was done on an illegal basis and violation of our rights is something completely different and has to come out. It's how we are as a free and open society. And the freedom of speech is precious. So we got to do everything we can to maintain that. And people that speak out should not be politically assassinated. And I don't mean physically, but politically assassinated or canceled. You have a right to, bring up the fact what's happening in Seattle without worrying about retribution, because it's the truth. And as long as you're speaking the truth and not spreading false news and gossip, you're okay. That doesn't mean that you're not responsible. Listen, if you're a person in the news and you deliberately put out false news and you're not being responsible, you could get sued for that. It's called defamation of character. So you always have to be careful of that, cognizant of that. So we'll get that. Plus, it would be great if we got one of our experts in national security on as well to further discuss the Snowden situation and the possibility of the pardon. What are the pluses and minuses with that? Also, what is happening with the whole Wikipedia thing and Epstein, this whole pedophilia situation. I've been seeing horrible things posted about Hillary Clinton. I just want to hope that they're false, okay, about the goings on this pedophile island and some of the abuses that were done to victims. This is something that we just cannot sleep on and just ignore and pretend like it's going to go away. Whoever, and I don't care who they are, whoever was involved in this and participated in some of these events, I'm just trying to sanitize it a little bit. I don't care who they are. They should be brought to justice. I don't care if it was Donald Trump. I don't care if it was Bill Clinton. I don't care if it was Barack Obama. I don't care if it was our favorite Hollywood actors. They need to be brought to justice, because we just cannot have this kind of stuff. It cannot go, we can't deny people justice. It's just one of those things. It's another one of those boundaries that we all have to decide that, everybody should be treated fairly and equally underneath the law, no matter who they are. There were the rumors about a certain actor who is all of a sudden, a citizen of another country without mentioning the name. What's the truth behind all of this? So let's try to investigate this a little bit, find out what's going on in the intelligence community, their take on this, and even, the security of our voting system. I think we got to start discussing this right now before it's too late. So
I agree.
I think those are important things that we need to take a look at and focus. If there is something that you're listening or watching on our inaugural TV broadcast, if there's something that you question or you want some clarification, or if you want to add to that, you can see that you can follow Yih-Chau Chang at LinkedIn and communicate via the messenger or whatever way you want to do it. It's always got great and fascinating stories that makes you think about what's going on. So, I appreciate you, Yih-Chau. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. You have a great day. Thank you.
You too. I'm going to go have some spaghetti now.
Wonderful.